Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing great. Today we're going to talk about phase in oscillators and warp modes, which have been, I think, mostly popularized by this plugin, and we're talking about all of the stuff here. And we're going to first try to explain the concept, and then we're also going to rebuild all of these modes, or as good as possible inside Bitwig. You do not need Bitwig for that, but I think it gives me some possibilities to visualize stuff which I do not have inside Serum, because I can actually separate the phase from the oscillator. So I hope it is kind of can use it as a didactic tool to give you some more insight. And of course, for those people who have Bitwig, it might be nice to know how to do this, and for those who not, maybe it gives you a little sneak peek of what the fuss is all about and why we love this tool, and especially in this case the grid. So let's dive in. Just for the sake of explanation, let me open the edit mode. I'm not going to do anything. It's just that this sine wave is really large and beautiful. So what does an oscillator consist of? Of course, this is heavily simplified, but there are three things that we're interested in today. First, of course, there's the frequency. Frequency determined by the note you play. How often do we go through this entire cycle? The second variable we care about is amplitude. How does it change over time while we cycle through it? And there's a third variable that's interesting, and that is the phase, meaning where are we during the cycle, and how do we move from the starting position to the end position. And that's where actually the warp modes start to kick in, because they manipulate the phase, or actually how we move from A to B. Let's pick one here. I think the simplest one to visualize is pulse width modulation. And now it's nicely visualized what's happening when we open the knob here. And let's imagine what's going on. It seems like we are really quickly going through the entire cycle, and then when we reach the end, we just stay there until the cycle finishes, or the time for the determined frequency has elapsed, and then we jump back at the beginning and start all over again. And it sounds like this. Now let's jump over to Bitwig and see if we can do the same thing. So here I have a standard wavetable oscillator. This concept is actually not related to wavetable, but it's mostly used in this concept, so I will do so here as well. Now, the nice thing in Bitwig is that the phase section, which is down here, where you can determine how pitch tracking works, the pitch, macro pitch, micro pitch, and tuning left and right. This section can be turned off when I go here and drag up, or no, actually down. Now you see that it has been turned off, and when I now connect this to an oscilloscope, I can see, well, it has just stopped wherever it happened to be in the cycle. And in this case, well, I can determine it as pretty much here. Let's turn it on again, and then turn it off. Now it's here. Now it's probably here in the cycle. And it just stands still and waits for some input. And here we have a phase input. Now, there's a category up here, and there's a whole lot of tools that we can use to manipulate and basically warp the phase. And we have this tool here, which is basically the same section. That's exactly this. And what it does, it produces a phase signal, and now we can see what this looks like. Basically looks like a sawtooth. Well, this is the time axis, and this is the position. right? And now we're moving from the beginning, which means from here, to the end point, which is here, in a very linear way. And when I connect this and then enter here, like, well, 100% modulation, we are back. We get our sine wave back. And let's align them real quick just for demonstration. And you can also hear it's exactly the same as before. And now I have all the pitch controls in here. And now they are overlaid. You can really see, okay, we're going first to the maximum. Then here is like 50%. Here's about 50%. So we're at 50% amplitude, or sorry, 50, yeah, kind of amplitude here. And then once we reach the maximum, we drop back to 0 and start all over again. Pulse width modulation is in here as well, and it's just called differently. For some reason, it's 4-month. So if I start moving, we see the exact same thing happening, right? The sine wave is actually squeezed. But there's a slight difference, because instead, I mean, what happens over in Serum is that we move the end phase, and squeeze it only to the kind of left side, so to speak. Here we start squeezing it from both directions, but that doesn't really matter, because you can always just set the start phase of the oscillator wherever you want. So this is identical. Interesting enough, this thing is bipolar, so we cannot go only in this direction. We can also stretch the waveform, or basically zoom into it, like so. And you can see it turns into almost a sawtooth, because we're now focusing on a very small part of the waveform, which is basically almost a straight line. Then eventually almost loses its amplitude completely, because we're so zoomed in. Okay, what's next? Let's go back to Serum again, and we might want to look at the bend. And these three are basically the same. This one is just, it goes in a positive direction. This one goes in a negative direction. This one just has its neutral position in the middle, and you can bend left or right. So what is this doing? How can we visualize this? In Bitwig, ironically, it's not the bend, it's the pinch, which does the same thing. Let me move this a little bit. Okay, and we can just hold and drag up, and this kind of squeezes it in the middle. And if we go in the opposite direction, it actually pulls it out to the side. Because now, and the curve here indicates clearly what is going on. So at the start of the wave cycle, we're going through it rather quickly, move like almost to the center position. Then in the center position, well, we kind of pause here, and then again to the end, we kind of speed up almost exponentially. And of course, we do quite the opposite when we squeeze the stuff together in the middle. We stay at the beginning for a long time, then we run through the waveform rather quickly, and at the end, we kind of slow down again. So nice, and you already begin to see that while in Serum, I had to decide which warp mode I want. Here in Bitwig, I'm not at all limited by that. You know, I can apply a 4-month and then do pinching or bending, how it's called in Serum, and I can continue to concatenate all sorts of stuff. So let's go back to our nice little Serum. Asymmetric. Let's look at what that does. Okay. Now, what would that be here? I think it's the skew, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think that looks right. Just drop it in here. And you can also see what it does with the phase. That's exactly how it works. And you can, the range here in Bitwig is a little bit bigger. I think you can go even further than you can go in. I have to select the right track. Nice. So the next one, flip is a little bit complicated to model. We'll maybe do it at the end of the video, but it's definitely, it is doable. So the next one is mirror. And what this does is, come on, why does everyone have a different key command to reset parameters? So what is mirroring doing? Basically, it runs through the entire waveform and then reverses direction and goes back, right? And that's what we see here. So let's see. Well, here we have a similar module. And of course, drop it in. And let's see what we see. We see the same thing, exact the same behavior. Or now, not behavior, result, but we've got a different behavior if we start moving the knob. This will just reproduce more of the same. It's almost like a sync sound. That's almost a sync sound. And when you look at what the phase is doing, is exactly what we predicted. It will run through the entire cycle rather quickly and then do the same thing in reverse and go back to 0. So looking at Serum, when we start moving this, it actually moves them closer together or further away. So it has an interesting. We can actually achieve the same behavior, and we have seen it already. If I take this skew and place it after the mirroring and start moving it, now we have exactly the same behavior. And then, of course, we can add more sync-ish. Okay, let's look at the next one. We'll look at Remap afterwards, because that's something really cool and only Serum has it. So let's look at the Quantize first. Basically, this looks a bit like a big crusher, right? And also sounds like it. So how to do that? I mean, we don't have anything here in the phase section, but we have a quantizer, which we can drop onto it. And now we already see that, yeah, that looks a bit like it. Of course, that's a bit much. And let's colorize it so that we can distinguish the two signals. Well, it just creates kind of a staircase here, and only discrete values are allowed, and that's how it then, kind of distorts the waveform. And sounds pretty similar. Let's attenuate. Neat. Let's go back to the mixer. Yeah, detail view. So what's next? After quantizing, FM, yeah, it is also related to phase manipulation, but it's not exactly warping, right? So we'll leave this aside. Now let's look into the remap. And this is really interesting. For the longest time, I had no idea what this is doing. But now that we have gone through these steps, we look at it, we probably instantly kind of realize what this is. Well, this is the phase signal. This is how we move through it. This is the time, right, or the frequency, and this is the amplitude at a given position. And now we can, well, turn this up and pull down or move it upwards, and we can see the waveform reflecting what we're doing. And now it's no surprise. This is exactly what we would expect, because we stay at the beginning and then we catch up and run through the entire waveform exponentially. And so command click will reset the waveform. And yeah, we can draw in here whatever we like, right? And create all sorts of interesting wave shapes. And this is something we cannot do in Bitwig until we get an MSEC. So maybe in the future. This is something really, really nice. Really, really nice. And then we have another mode like Remap 2, which basically applies this thing twice in succession. And then we have 3 times and 4 times, which just repeats the waveform more often. Now you have also all of your LFO shapes available here. So just for some instant fun, sidechain or some user shape. It's really interesting. Really interesting. So I suggest you start playing around with it. I just realized that we missed a mode here, which is the sync. And basically now we can actually say, hey, sync is a warp mode. Sync actually affects the phase of a signal. And let's see how. Go back to our phase section, and up here we have a sync. Let's grab it. Now first let's kind of try to imagine what should happen. Go back to Serum real quick, see what happens. Okay, it starts kind of shoving in sine wave from the right and condensing the waveform basically. And the way it sounds is no surprise. And that's how it sounds. So how would the phase change? So actually what happens, the more we move this knob up, we reach the end stage quicker, and I would postulate that as soon as you reach maximum, we jump back to 0 and then just start moving forward again until we reach the end of the cycle. So let's see. Okay, that's exactly what seems to happen. And it goes on and on and on and on. So what actually happens is that we amplify the signal. And so it gets, in this case in Bitwig, bigger than 1, so it overshoots actually, goes up to here. And then we just take this segment and transpose it down to 0 and apply it here. And this process just continues until we over amplify here, and then it folds back or to 0 and starts growing again. And this is how sync works. Going back to Serum, we have 2 different modes, 2 different sync modes. So how do they work? Basically, well, when we listen to the sound coming out, we always hear some sort of crackling that's especially audible when you use a sine wave. And this might not be desirable, so we have a sync window. And when you look at the beginning and the end, we always have a zero crossing at the end, which makes it sound softer. But also, it kind of alters the waveform. So it's not exactly the same thing. And we have the full window, which just smooths it out here at the ends even further. This is nice, but this is something we don't have here in Bitwig. We only have the sync. I try to emulate it, and it is somehow possible using envelopes, but it's not exactly the same, and it's rather tricky. So I think this concludes actually the part where Serum is involved. We will now try to replicate the flip mode, which does flip the phase at a given position. So it just, if I go to like 180 degrees, it just took this part here and placed it up here. And we can go through it. Now the entire waveform is inverted, and we have 2 cycles available with this knob, so we can do it again. Now we're back to the original. Okay. How would we do that in Bitwig? We do have a reverse module, which if we drop it in, it just flips the phase, but it's not exactly the desired result. So what we do here, let's move that to the side. We can actually use this split module, because at every output, now we have 2 output, the phase of the signal is rotated 90 degrees. And yeah, that's exactly what we want. That is a phase rotation. This is a phase inversion, sorry. So let's connect it, and now let's look at this signal. Okay, and replace this real quick. Yeah, that's rotated 50 degrees. 50%, 180 degrees. But that's only half of the rent. We now have to kind of merge them together again. And let's go to the mix section. We have a merge module here. And let's colorize it so that the phase signal maintains the same color throughout. And now in the logic section, we have a button, which of course lets us select which output is active. So, and how this works is, well, the button uses a Boolean. Well, it's either 1 or 0. The state is either true or false, and that state determines which output is selected. So if we could create a condition or a comparison that gives us a true or false depending on the position, we could emulate this. And it's actually simpler than it sounds. We have in the logic section, we have a bigger than, and in this case smaller than, comparison, where it compares whether the signal at input A is bigger or smaller than what we have in the second input. And for the second input, we just take a value, and a value can be something between 0 and 1. And we want now the phase to flip exactly at the cross section when the value here crosses with the amplitude of the phase signal. And we do that by feeding in the phase signal here, and the comparative signal, the signal we compare to, is this one. Now this will be altering back and forth really quickly every single time we go through this phase position. And when I drag this out and connect it to the split, we can see this happening. It's breaking apart exactly at 50%, which means a 180-degree rotation. So let's see what comes out of it if we connect this now and reconnect the oscillator and the phase signal here. So, okay, now that's exactly what we want, right? 50% flip, now 100%. We're back to the original. Or, no, actually not, we have flipped it. And that's how that works. Let's see if there's anything else. So that's it. I think we covered pretty much everything in here, and I hope it gives you a deeper understanding of how phase works, what the warp modes are. You can apply this knowledge, of course, now to Bitwig, and I think pretty much every wavetable synth that has even small ambitions now includes some sort of warp modes. And the sounds you're getting out of this are, of course, are really interesting. I mean, let's just demo that sound just a little bit. And yeah, just as a reminder, in Bitwig, you have the option to modulate all of these parameters as you see fit. And as always, if you like what you saw, like, comment, subscribe. It really helps out. And yeah, till next time.